at least, and then I'll just upload the recording. So I don't know who you are, Nosy Bunk. Are you someone I know? Some of the story, it's okay. Yeah. I don't know what you mean by that, but... Oh, you heard some of the story. Yeah. Oh, you don't know me. Nice, okay. Well, welcome. Um, hmm. What brought you here? I'm curious. How did you find this place? Hmm. Just browsing Twitch. Nice. I'm new to Twitch. I don't really, I barely watch it. Um, well, I watch, like, Xenoblade streams and, like, I used to watch Healthy Gamer. I don't know if you know Healthy Gamer. But then I found, um, oh yeah, you clicked because you liked the topic. Yeah, I forgot what I called it. I'm gonna check. I called it subtle problem dynamics in relationships. Yeah. So, whoa. I guess for background, I have a bachelor's degree in psychology. I'm not sure that that's where my view is informed from, but I think that just my interest in psychology generally, and also the aid of uh, going through undergrad at the same time. I don't know. Maybe it taught me a way of like constantly, carefully trying to think about people and stuff. Maybe I think about this because I was in a fucked up situation. um, yeah, but hmm. I also do a blog that is like that's where I usually do stuff. I'm trying to do Twitch now because it's like really fast. Writing is really hard, kind of. And like I'll show you. This is the website. Where is it? So like I don't know. I write like personal psychological explorations of things. This is about like why people might use drugs to actually they're trying to affect other people, almost like it's almost like someone strapping a bomb to their chest and being like, listen to what I say, or like, I mean, that's one way that people can use it. But there's other ways, like you can drug yourself in ways that creates like some superficial fake narrative that fits like stereotype narratives of drug use that impacts other people and stuff like that. Some of the contents, like some of the stuff I get into, is like pharmacological explanations of certain things. Like I focus on schizophrenia a lot, drug war stuff, and empathy. Like rather than villainizing different people, we try to look at um, people as people because they aren't whatever the hell we pretend they are, right? They're not like psycho machines trying to like kill us all or whatever else. um, yeah, I'm still down to stream. If any of these topics sound interesting, I'm totally down to like go into them. So feel free, and I'll entertain you at your wish. um, this is kind of about. It's kind of a weird thing. So I'm diagnosed ADHD since I was a child. I have some skepticism about diagnosing in general, but here I'm kind of entertaining it, and it's kind of the idea like so. Dopamine gets talked about in relation to ADHD as the drugs that treat it are dopamine drugs, and people kind of like in the colloquial language will talk about it as if it's like a dopamine deficiency, which I think is way oversimplified. But so here it kind of talks about this idea that this is one of my favorite weird ideas, which I don't know if it's actually true, but it's fun. It's kind of the idea that delusions, like the spectrum of like ADHD symptoms all the way to like a higher dopamine delusional state, they're kind of like that there's like something being changed there, which is like almost like people with ADHD who aren't medicated, they almost might lack the necessary or useful amount of deludedness that helps us get through our daily lives. So like I'll actually go to this one because I don't remember all the things. So it's kind of like gambling. I think the way that like my experience with what I assume is like this supposed ADHD problem in my life, or this is what I have problems with, which I was diagnosed ADHD because of, is basically like when I think about the future and like long-term goals, it's kind of like I can't really see like I can see the outcome that I want, but I can't like I feel like I would have to see every single step along the way, otherwise I start feeling like this isn't realistic. Like look at me, like I look at my past. I always am like messing stuff up. I don't end up at the goal that I really want. Instead, I go on all these tangents and stuff, or like I don't know, but basically it feels like say I want to do good at school. Part of me doing good is me having faith that I actually can reach that goal. And for that to happen, I feel like I need to like dissect every single step and make sure that all of them are possible. Otherwise, I'm wasting my time. Like if one of the steps is a wall that I can't pass, then why would I ever waste all my time investing into something that's not even possible? Like why would I do that? So then like I think basically there's some amount of like delusion or faith that we need to use and just assume, like almost like grandiosity. Like people with grandiosity, they're probably like, so psychosis and like mania and stuff is often talked about as like an effect of say like stimulant drugs. Like the ADHD medications can cause those effects. And you might have seen like people getting narcissistic or grandiose on the medication, on stimulants and crack and cocaine and all of that stuff. So like I'm kind of arguing that like that grandiosity is the extreme opposite spectrum or side of the spectrum, where it's kind of like now you're starting to have a faith that everyone else is like, no, this is kind of ridiculous, like. And so like the most extreme, and the example I use here is like, what if you can transfer, or I say like, so when I talk about like motivation and behavior, I give the example of like, it would be really, really cool if I can transfer my brain into the body of a dolphin. Like the barrier to me chasing that goal is not that it's not like I don't want that enough. It's not like I'm not interested enough, but I completely won't even entertain thinking of a way to reach that goal because I literally just think it's impossible. So I think it's like, why would I waste my time doing that? And then I think so like if you take enough like weed or stimulants and then you get psychotic, maybe you'll be like, oh my God, like I'm going to work on creating this dolphin human brain transference machine. And then you start like investing your life, and then like people start calling you crazy, and then like it just spirals out of control or something, right? So like that might be so like then there's like the opposite end, where I think my problem usually is like I'm almost so agnostic about everything in life. Like I have so little faith about even basic things. Like I have to actually see how it's going to play out to believe in it. Like I won't even like entertain something like if I okay, so like it could be something stupid like getting health care. I might be like, do I really have the capacity to do that? I don't even know all the steps involved in that. That just sounds like a whole thing. I'm not even gonna. That's like for someone like me, undergoing that whole process isn't even realistic. Like my brain's all fucked up. Like, I'm just gonna do something else that I can actually do, that's actually worth my time. And I think like a lot of my life is pretty much defined by making choices like that. And I actually think it has costs and benefits. So it's not like I think there's pros and cons. Uh, and then I kind of get into like solipsism, which I feel like I wonder. I don't know. I've liked the idea of solipsism. Not necessarily that I think people are not conscious or something like that, but that I just don't know. I can't conclude anything about people's consciousness, and that might be the most extreme form of that kind of rationality. So yeah, that topic is kind of interesting. Agnostic sanity, that's pretty much almost a related topic. I don't know if you follow any rationalist culture, but there's like the most famous rationalist right now is this guy called Scott Alexander. And he runs a blog called Astral Star Codex, or Slate Star Codex is the old version of it. There's an interesting topic about whether mental illness is a preference. I think that's such a weird, like, controversial topic. I don't even know if I can get into that right now. I'd have to, like, recap a lot. But this one definitely is really interesting. So one example actually is like, so like say someone's like depressed or something, or even has ADHD, and it makes them have less motivation for things. But then like, what about the flu? What if you get the flu? That's going to control your behavior and your motivation. And it seems more reasonable. Like, we wouldn't say that the flu is causing mental illness, but what if it is? What if it's causing you to be temporarily mentally ill? Or even the effects of drugs. Like, it gets even weirder. Like, here, this line. The drug PCP, like you've heard of people like flipping cars or whatever on PCP. What if it's a treatment for exertion fatigue, the mental illness caused by physical exertion? And so, like, PCP might do something to your brain that allows you to not become mentally sick from trying to lift a car, so that you're actually able to do it at the cost of destroying your body. So there's a lot of weird, like, framings that I think can exist with mental illness that, I don't know. Like, it's kind of freaky. Like, I don't know. So, I'm pretty skeptical that the DSM, I think the problem with, like, all these diagnoses, like, it's like a lot of them are going back to a long time ago, and it's like we had a frame that existed because we didn't know that much. And then we know more. And then the way that we're learning more is by fitting those new observations into this framing that we assumed before we knew almost anything at all. Like, we're kind of just categorizing everything into the packages that we've decided already exist, which we decided they exist during a point at which we didn't have enough information to decide anything. And I think the future of, like, as we progress forward with psychology, I think we're going to continue packaging things into these made-up frameworks that are actually useful and do kind of, like, something like mental illnesses are happening. Problems are happening, that's for sure. But I think, like, we mess up when we start, like, framing it as, like a physical brain disease that's destroyed you. That probably is happening too. But I think even something like, I think you can become psychotic and without, I don't think it's necessary to have like a brain disease that just like degrades your ability to see or think. I don't think it's like that. I think you can basically like torture someone into becoming psychotic. And I think sometimes people's lives are messed up enough that they will be more prone to psychosis, and that I think it's like more complicated even, that like stress will cause physical brain problems like shrinking or damages or whatever else. And I don't know, it's like this whole complicated mess. Like when people try to like take physical things and translate that to like an explanation of what's happening psychologically, that's not really correct, I think. I think we don't have enough information to actually do that. Like, so I every time like conversations go in that direction, I'll start bringing up how like speech itself is a biological process. Like people don't want to think about me talking right now as a biological process, but it's like that framing is easily possible. Like my mouth is biological, my brain is biological. It's all just chemical interactions. So everything I'm saying and thinking to you right now is just biology. And I think that everything is just kind of inherently like that. You could even say that I am like genetically destined to say these things or something. I don't know. Like you were genetically destined to meet me through this conversation somehow. Like that's how it all played out. And the environment, that thing, that's just everyone else's genetics that they inherited effects onto you. Like if someone beats you up, they either inherited through their genes or other people's genes, like their parents' genes or their friends' genes or everyone at the school's genes. Like all these people's genes are interacting in such a way that that person has beat you up. And now that is what you've inherited through other people's physical bodies. Like that, I think that framing is even possible. So it's like, it's all really weird. I think the trap is that we conclude things that are oversimplistic too early. Like some of the framing is right, like, but it's just we start like filling in the gaps with like it's almost like people are becoming psychotic with their conceptualization of psychiatry. Like it's almost like a whole conspiracy-ish way of looking at the world. It's like if astrology was just taken seriously and turned into like a soft science. That's what's basically happening. And people will probably get pissed that I say that. I mean, I study this and I think it's great, but also we have to be honest that, I mean, you can't just, so with what I said, for people out there, that I feel like the danger is that you might start dismissing things, like dismissing everything, or be like, none of it's real. Like, you can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. How about you're not allowed to do that unless you get like a degree in psychology or something? You're not allowed to be the authority on rejecting other people's psychological ideas unless you've gotten a significant, unless you've gotten deep enough yourself, I would say. Like, you have to be skeptical of yourself even. Don't exploit this kind of skepticism for your agenda. People do that constantly. Don't do that. So I don't know if you're out there still, Noisy Bonk. If so, thank you. And feel free again to ask any questions or direct me like your puppet. You didn't employ me for nothing. I am your free worker, your slave. Manipulation isn't bad. What a clickbaity title, right? So this is kind of semantic, but it's also, people are exploiting semantics for their agenda. It's kind of like what I was saying a minute ago. Like, okay, the problem is that I think every behavior, I think socializing is just, the point of it is to manipulate people. Like, I say things to do something to you. That's the point. I don't say things hoping that you will just not hear me and nothing will happen. I mean, maybe I'll do that sometimes for a different purpose, but that's not the point of socializing. And so, with that in mind, like if you think someone is a villain, if you describe them as a psychopath, there's a risk in using that lens to find malicious interpretations, interpretations in which the person has malicious intent, and kind of framing the discussion that way. So like, the example might be, what if someone gets you flowers and you're like, they're doing that because they're trying to manipulate me into liking them. And it's like, that's bad. I think looking at it that way, that's pretty bad. Like, because it's like, it's assumed that manipulation is bad there, but it's like, you're saying that someone went out and like wasted money to try to make you happy, and that's evil. Like, that's what you're saying. And everything is also inherently selfish. Like, that's another thing. Like, or at least in the sense that people care about each other because they care about how your emotions make them feel. And that's a good thing. That's a very, very good thing. But the bad thing, like, what would be actually, I think the word selfish should be, we should refrain from using it unless, like, we can use it if someone is doing something in which they're willing to force other people to pay costs for their own gain. Like, if I gyp you, or no, oh god, I shouldn't have said that. I'm against what I just said. I think that's, as a kid, I didn't know that that even had, like, some fucked up, implications. Whoever's out there, don't imitate what I just did. That was fucked up. But, you know what I mean? Like, what that evil phrase is used to, describe. Ripping people off, I should say. Like, that's fucked up. That's selfish. Like, trying to, like, enslave other people. Trying to, misuse them. Yeah, that's fucked up. And that's what we should call selfish. We shouldn't be talking about selfishness as doing things for our own benefit, because sometimes our own benefit is making other people happy. And it's just not useful, because then literally, no matter what, everything we do is something that we want to do, and we're doing it because we want to, and it's just inescapable. But with manipulation, I think it's kind of similar. People use the word manipulation to mean something bad. But also, because of what I just described, it's like, you can say that people doing nice things is evil by calling it manipulation, and everyone thinks the word manipulation is bad and evil. So all you have to do is, like, prove that someone's being manipulative, and basically, like, doing some way of, like, making you feel different, or change your behavior, or control you. Like, getting someone flowers is trying to control them. You're doing a lot of things. You're like, the more nice you are to people, the more that they owe you. And if you don't like that dynamic, you're actually promoting parasitism. Yeah. Parasitism. If you don't accept fairness and exchange and fairness, then you're basically saying that it's okay for a one-sided relationship to form where you're not expecting anything in return, which means people can just exploit you endlessly without boundaries, and obviously that's really bad. Like, that's like psychopathic. Like, you're enabling psychopathy if you don't accept that kind of fairness and exchange, and kind of like, what is the word that people use? People use a word, what is the word? I don't know if you watch the streamer Destiny. He usually talks about it. It's like, it's just some word for exchange. It doesn't really matter. Okay, let's continue. The next thing I talk about a lot is psychedelics. I'm gonna grab water real quick. Okay. Psychedelics are a risky topic. I'm like super into perception and why perception works the way it does. As an example, this one goes into, there's actually nice diagrams in this one. Look at that. Oh gosh. So this affects, it's basically similar to what you might see if you took psychedelics. And I argue that the mechanisms are actually overlapping. That the reason this is happening in your eyes, psychedelics are making it happen more, and making it happen in places that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And this is a hypothesis, though, so keep that in mind. This is not divine truth or something. So it kind of gets into like this stuff. These are like rods and cones in your eye. And so like the rods, they converge into a single point. So like light is hitting each of these, stimulating them. But in the end, they all converge on one signal, which means like there's an area in which light, different points of the light, all register as the same signal. So that means it's all just one pixel, basically. Whereas the cones have more individualized pathways, and cones deal with color, rods deal with black and white, and lines basically is what rods also deal with. So here's like, this is on a, what website? It's on, well, it's on Effect Index, where they try to categorize all of the different visual and mental changes that happen with every different drug. And so this is like their example of one of the effects on psychedelics, which is obviously pretty similar to this. And the thing about this happens if you move your eyes. If you hold your eyes absolutely still, it'll actually stop. And making it bigger, like consuming more of your vision, it will do it better. And so the idea that I bring up is the possibility that, so there's like something about night vision. With night vision, so the thing about this thing with the rods, this means that, so like, there's like a threshold that there's a certain amount of stimulation that is needed for this cell to be stimulated and to produce a signal. And when you have all of these routing into the same signal, they're additive, basically. And so they sum up and create a large enough signal to reach the threshold, which means that these operate way better when there's not that much light. And so the argument that I kind of get into here is what, like, I explore the idea about whether or not, like, say these amacrine cells, this is another graphic of what was above, but it's more confusing, it looks like. So I kind of get into this idea that the amacrine cells might play some role in the shift of your eyes being adapted to the light versus the darkness. And so basically there might be serotonin, or there are, I think, let's make sure. There's like, they are serotonergic. So the thing is, the psychedelics are serotonin drugs, and there are serotonin mechanisms on these amacrine cells. So the idea is kind of that the amacrine cells seem to play some role in darkness adaptation, and that maybe what's happening when we take psychedelics is that it's inducing increases of convergence. Like, it's basically causing more rods to converge on single pixels. And the thing is, the reason that this happens, so maybe I should have gone into this part first, so then it would, but now it's all going to come together, don't worry. So the thing about this is, okay, so let me just make sure I word this correctly. So there's something called, rod convergence. That's what I just explained there. I wonder if it makes me look stupid that I have to read the thing that I wrote to make sure that I that I even know what I'm saying. But I think that's okay. Okay, so let me see. Okay, so I'm going to just try to do it. So let me see. I think it's that the rods are dealing more with motion perception and location, basically. Like when you look at something, the way your eyes are determining where something is located involves the rods partly. And what kind of is happening is that your peripheral vision, so like the rods are really dense in the center, but then they get like, I think that it's that, okay, so it's like basically the convergence of rods is like more in the peripheral vision. So like more of these rods are like combining, and the resolution of your perception is lower there. But in the center of your vision, it's like highly resolute. You have like a very clean picture of things. So you can really tell where things are. So like when you look at this image, whatever you look at directly will not move, basically. And then it's always in your peripheral vision. And as you move your eyes, your brain basically is like filling in an assumption about where the location of pixels are. And when you move your eyes, though, that estimation of your the location changes. And so what that means basically is that the pixels are like moving, basically, in your brain. And so you see it as moving. And I guess the way to make a really oversimplistic argument here would be that maybe what psychedelics are doing is inducing night vision, which causes your resolution to kind of like drop. And what happens with this is more of this effect will start happening everywhere, and then everything starts looking like it's doing this. Even if you just move like this, it's like people talk about a breathing walls effect. And I think what's probably happening is you're actually breathing, and the subtle motion of like swaying is like causing the wall to actually look like that. Like, you know, have you ever seen people have like the rubber pencil illusion? I'm gonna see if it actually works on camera. Let's see. Yeah, it kind of works. You see how it looks like it's like bending, and it's not. That's an illusion. I think it's sort of like that. I think it's I kind of lost my train of thought, but let's move to a different topic because we are done with that. Evolution of death. This idea is possibly insane. I actually don't know. I don't necessarily believe. It's not like when I post things and say things, I'm exploring hypothetical realities. Psychology inherently must involve that, I think. So I think that kind of taught me to be very cautious and not jump to conclusions, which I think is the problem with soft science, is that we can't actually do that. And hard sciences, they want you to jump to conclusions. Like, that's the whole point, is people feel safe the more conclusive we can be. And the fact that psychology doesn't really permit this, I think, freaks out a lot of the like biologists. And I hang out in chats with biologists where they talk shit about it. So yeah, that happens. This is more empathy posting, but it's also like a weird pharmacological thing, talking about like certain hormones involved in stress are like hugely involved in addiction pathology stuff. And like basically, so there's a whole section on dynorphin. This is like a neurotransmitter, kind of has anti-dopamine effects, and also it gets released when dopamine is really high. And people take drugs which basically usually stimulate dopamine. Even if they have other mechanisms, they usually still stimulate dopamine indirectly or something. And they also indirectly stimulate this stuff, which is presumably some response to having too much dopamine, maybe. I don't know. We can't really conclude that, but it does happen when there's more dopamine, then there'll be more dynorphin. And dynorphin, the most interesting thing about this, oh my god, it binds to the kappa opioid receptors, which, if you've ever heard of the drug salvia, that's its main mechanism. It is a dynorphin drug. Like if you think of cocaine and amphetamine as dopamine drugs, salvia is the dynorphin drug. And then there's more of them. And basically all of them cause you to hallucinate and go crazy. So it's very interesting. And so like I basically focused a lot of my exploration of physiological things on dynorphin. With this article is basically the one that I got the deepest into. And then there's cool photography things. This is somebody's art though. I took a picture of people's art. It's kind of fucked up. It's horrible, but their art looks cooler with this framing. It's not like I took a picture of a picture though. This is like these chains are actually dangling, and I tried to make it all abstract. And this was like just fiber optics. Like all it was fiber optics just hanging there and being colorful, like Disneyland or something. But yeah, so like this explores like all of the physical connections that dopamine and kappa opioid has, and glutamate and stress kindling ideas, like why stress might prime us to react stronger and stronger, and how addiction plays into that, and why most schizophrenics seem to use drugs and beyond just self-medication, and then kind of relates it to psychedelia and their mechanisms, and also why it's different, because I don't think they're the same. I'm not convinced that psychedelics are like schizophrenia, but I do think that we're calling a lot of different things schizophrenia, which might actually be different things. So here comes the riskiest possible thing to say on a stream, but I'm going to risk my everything for all of you. But I don't know if it's actually that risky. I mean, it's kind of risky. People can exploit this vulnerability, and I urge you not to, please. Basically, some of and I'll do a whole video on this actually later. I'll just expose everything so that people can destroy me if they wish. Joking. But I will upload a video about it. But some of my content is actually about personal experiences with psychosis. When I was in middle school, I had religious delusions. I'm not even religious now, but I had religious delusions. I had beliefs that people could read my thoughts, and I went around like spamming my thoughts, like in my head I'd just be like fuck, 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 like so that they couldn't hear anything I'm saying. And then I would get paranoid of people trying to harm me, which I have explanations for why it happened, and which has actually informed my direction going forward, studying a lot of this stuff, because it's like I've basically firsthand observed a lot of things and tried to understand what the hell was going on. And I'm not sure so I'll say I don't think that's necessarily generalizable to all people with similar symptoms. That's one problem. But that's like a whole different thing. So basically, I've gone into experiences, I've explored my experiences with psychosis, and what I think psychosis actually is subjectively, like what's happening to our mind. Usually I focus on, I think there's like two ways you can become delusional, for example. I think, like, what is delusion? Usually we're talking about, like, if someone was raised religious, usually when people are thinking of like schizophrenic delusions, they're not talking about that. they're usually talking about like someone that has like a framework of the world and suddenly it gets changed to something either stupid or just so obviously wrong. And kind of maybe suddenly even, but maybe not suddenly either. There's a lot of different ways the word delusion gets used, but let's focus on this. So, one way I think people can become delusional is that if they have some framework that's comprised of a whole series of memories and kind of like fact memories, let's say, if you were to dissociate or have like amnesia for any of those facts, that opens the door to forming perspectives that would otherwise have contradicted those facts, which means they won't be contradicted, which means you're allowed to believe those things now. So, like, say you have like 50 points of information about how your friend behaves, and you trust your friend because they've proven that they've basically earned your trust. What if you forgot about all the times that they earned your trust? Then it's kind of reasonable if you suddenly don't trust them, if you forgot about those experiences. And kind of like the paper, I don't even know where it is now, but there was that paper that I was going over, like, it was like called stress-induced hallucinogenesis. It kind of goes into a section about delusions, and it talks about some research about how, like, your emotional, or just simply like your state, like if you're in a state of, like, say, threat or paranoia, that it biases your access to your memories. Because, like, obviously we don't constantly remember every detail about our lives. It's way more contextual. Like, we temporarily forget things, then remember them when it's kind of like useful or something. And if you have this sense that people are threatening, the idea is that you'll focus on the memories, you'll be biased to notice the memories that confirm that, or that are protective, probably more like, but you'll sort of see through the lens that they're threatening. It's confirmation bias, basically. And so one of the things is like that normal people are not going about life feeling threatened. Then if you make someone feel threatened, then they might become paranoid, and that it makes sense that they would, but people might start becoming paranoid where it doesn't make sense because now they're being biased. But I think everyone is usually biased. Like, remember a while ago I was talking about how people use faith to, like, guide themselves towards the future. Like, they just trust, they take the leap of faith and take risks in order to, like, reach their goals, and that's useful. Like, you can't really know everything. It's not that practical to know it's not like you created like a whole video of how the future is gonna play out, and now you're like, yeah, I trust this. I saw everything. I had visions of the future. Like, that's just not practical, obviously. So people are biasing constantly, though. Like, they're either biasing positively, they're biasing negatively, they're reinforcing their perspectives, and so then I think that's kind of happening when people turn psychotic. And I think it could even bend our actual perceptions, and that I think there's sort of like feedback loops that people get into. So I don't think I can fully explain this all here right now. This is like a huge topic. I'm just going to warn you. So go read the article if that actually interests you. But I'm going to try to do like an oversimplistic thing. So basically there's kind of, I argue about like certain feedback loops where basically you can get more and more stressed to the point that like that dynorphin neurotransmitter starts to play a bigger role in like amnesiac effects and disrupting memories, and also probably not in a random arbitrary way, but in a way that's like really biased towards certain goals. Like, it kind of explores like if you think of dissociation, I think it's like rewarded and trained. So by that, what I mean is like, say there's like a belief system or a framing of life that is really painful. You can kind of like dissociate from various components of your experience and you'll be protected from that. Then you'll feel better because life isn't bad because you're actually blind to the bad parts or something like that. And I kind of like have explored dissociation in relevance to, let me just see if I can find it. It's kind of hard when I'm not in the articles anymore. Damn it. Oh. I think it'll work if I just do that. Okay, so attention and dissociation. This topic's really fun. So I will say, I think the last topics that we went into, I don't know if I butchered it, but I definitely didn't convey my actual views on them. And I kind of backed away from that topic because literally the post that is about that is like this, I think it's like a 30 to 40 page essay. So it's not like I can't realistically get into it. And I feel like the more that I try to simplify it, I'm actually poisoning the topic. And I kind of just wanted to back out of that. But I'm segueing into this, which is this is a little more like not focused on biology and the way it intertwines with our reality. Because doing that is like the hardest possible topic, I think. And I even think that essay, it's not even close to the full picture. I think it's just kind of hoping to steer academics in a direction that might be useful, but I think will possibly not depict reality in the end. I think we just can't. We just don't have the resolution of data and methods of observation that would allow for such a thing. Okay, so the idea, though, with attention and dissociation, let's get into that. This is just like a whole like smorgasbord of every topic. Well, that's kind of fun. Okay, so there's a term, I don't know if we need to get into salience, actually. It might be important, let me think. Okay, so the idea here is, I think we are trained to have certain kinds of dissociative responses, but I also think that dissociation and our ordinary modes of paying attention to stimuli are not really different. I think that the way we go about life is purposely, constantly, endlessly dissociating from things in a way that's beneficial to us. Like when we focus, like say we're, like even just perceptually, while we're driving, I think that we're dissociating from like various components of like the side of the road, or just like we're obviously trying to stay focused to some degree on what's happening. If I were to sometimes people talk about dissociating while driving, like when you daydream. This is related, actually. That's when it's like you've automated all the aspects of driving, usually in a straight line on the freeway or something, so well that you can start to allocate your attention elsewhere and just pay minimal attention to what's happening while you're driving, because it's just easy. So then you can start paying attention to the stimuli within your mind. And so, yeah, like the dissociation is more like you're now paying attention to what's in your head rather than the external world. And so then you can kind of see how this might relate to like someone that's like abused. if people are abused, I think that I want to see if I gave examples here, because I compare it to addiction. Interesting. So I basically say that dissociation is rewarding, or that if it's not rewarding, it's protecting us from being punished on some level. Not necessarily punished by like a person trying to punish us, but like negative experiences that hurt us. And and I think that's the case even with minor things, like while we're driving, there's like a whole dynamic of us paying attention to certain details and ignoring others that is totally geared to us not like just steering into the wall and like bursting into flames and having this traumatic death. So it's like, even then, some aspect of trauma, or not even trauma, but like the fear of death, is causing us to dissociate in ways that are highly useful for the purpose of driving. And that might seem like a weird framing, but I'm going to try to help make that make more sense. Okay, let's see. I'm going to see if conditioned dissociative responses. Let's see, what is this paragraph about? Okay, so the example I give here is like, say you're watching someone. Oh wow, the example I use is pretty fucked up. It's a personal example. Wow, I don't want to. Kind of wasn't planning to do this, but we're already getting into it. That'll be a whole story for another time. But basically, my mom dated an abusive person, and there were moments where she like slammed, or no, the abusive person slammed my mother's face into the concrete. And one way I think that we can feel better is to stop paying attention to our empathy. It's like if we were to meditate. Like people meditate and try to like focus on different elements of experience. Like just think about, like right now, you can focus on what I'm saying, right? Or you can start focusing on thoughts, and then you'll lose track of what I'm saying. You're kind of like going from dissociating from away from me and your own thoughts. And so here, though, I think you can dissociate from paying attention to the feelings that arise from empathizing with someone being abused. Like today I was watching this guy, Mr. Girl, and he was talking, there was some guest was talking about how people that work in like slaughterhouses get this form of PTSD, or not just slaughterhouses, but also like people who were in war, killing people and stuff. They'll get this kind of PTSD where they don't feel any empathy anymore while they're doing bad things. And I think that's because to pay attention to empathy, you're being punished. Like, it's traumatic to pay attention to your empathy in that scenario. Like on some level, it's almost like you're being punished. Like you're being smacked in the face every time you empathize. So then you learn how to not do that. It's almost like some like Zen meditative bullshit. I don't know. You know, like you're basically like teaching yourself how to like master some element of your mind through trauma. And trauma is like pushing you to the limits where you're like, but it's kind of like out of your control in a conscious way too. In a way, like you're basically being pushed into a corner based on fear, and you're afraid to be hurt. So now you learned how to not be hurt by just erasing attention to a whole aspect of your existence. But then the problem is obviously then if you don't have empathy, you can start abusing people and not care. And then you can have like, probably that would result in like contagious abuse dynamics. But luckily I am not. I'm not really so much. I've been like this. I've felt my empathy be turned off, but I can turn it on. But I do get really scared when other people are hurting to a serious degree, and I tend to kind of back away if it's too much. But I don't like dissociate so I can like selfishly like fuck people up or something. Like I'm obsessed with ethics. I think stuff like that makes it really hard. I'm not dissociated from my concern about ethics. So you might kind of like relate that to like people who meditate to avoid physical pain, or you might relate it to you either paying attention to what I'm saying, or if you pay attention to what you're thinking, or even if you just look at something on your desk, if you focus hard enough on like looking at that thing and observing it, you'll probably lose track of what I'm saying because you can't really pay attention to everything. And so imagine if, so we have incentives to what we pay attention to. Like we don't just pay attention to boring things, right? We pay attention to things because they lead us to a reward. And they either lead us to a reward or they help us escape some sort of pain. And maybe you, right now, maybe you are doing that somehow while engaging with me. Maybe you're escaping boredom. I don't know. Maybe you're escaping pain. Maybe you're just interested in what I'm saying, or whatever else. Like there's inevitably going to be motivations, basically, that guide your attention. But then there's also kind of like novelty situations. Like if something just exploded right now, that will just capture your attention so hard that you'll be like ripped away, and your face will be like glued to where the explosion came from, and you'll probably even forget what you were doing a second ago. And like it's like you've literally just dissociated so hard that it's like you've been ripped out of your body, and now you're just like glued to figure out what the hell just happened. And now all of your attention is there, and now it's basically like you don't know what the fuck's going on. Maybe you'll die if you don't pay attention. Like maybe that explosion is like, it's like the universe putting a gun to your head, like, you better fucking pay attention or you're gonna die. And then you're like, you're so traumatized by the potential or the threat of harm that would come if you were to pay attention to everything that was happening before the explosion. Because if you ignored the explosion and just like say you kept playing video games, maybe you'll die. So like the fear of death becomes so strong in that moment that you're like ripped away, and you focus on like what the fuck is going on, like maybe I'm gonna die, what is this, like where did it come from, is something crazy going on? And then all of your thoughts, all of your mind, all of your senses are like plugged into that thing. And maybe it doesn't last that long, like because the explosion happens and then it stops, and then you're like, are we safe now? But then it's like maybe it'll happen again, like I don't know. And so you'll kind of like start to investigate, but you're not as plugged into your freak out mode. Like if it just was like explosion after explosion, you'd be like, holy shit, and you'd be stuck in that like freak out mode, and you'd be like looking out the window like, oh my god, what the fuck, like but like since like say it's like one explosion, it's like there's like this dynamic process where it's like you plugged in, then you kind of back off and you're like, let's explore what's going on. And then after enough time of it not happening again, you're like, okay, it's probably safe to pay attention to other stuff. Like I'm getting repeated feedback from the universe that there's no gun anymore, no danger. And so I think like dissociation and trauma is pretty much a same kind of thing, except it might be like let's say the empathy situation again. Like in this case, the universe is like, you know that time when you were like empathizing with this horrible, fucked up scenario? Like maybe you visited like a slaughterhouse and saw all these animals like screaming to death, and then like you'll kind of be like, your mind's like, it's basically like, that hurts so fucking bad, don't pay attention to it. Because like the other thing you can do, if you know you're not in danger, like in a slaughterhouse, you're not really in danger, right? So it's better to actually just not pay attention to the thing that's hurting you. Then you won't feel the pain, and then you solved the problem. And I think that this happens sort of automatically at a certain point. Like, we're so inclined, like, it's similar to the explosion. Like, it's not like it's not like an explosion happens and you're like, should I pay attention to this? Let me think about this for a second. It's more just like you're paying attention. And I think that when people experience traumas, it's usually more like that, and their dissociative experience becomes like this trained response. Like, anytime they start to feel like they're coming close to experiencing that pain again, they shut it off, and they escape that pain. But then, like, people might not be able to, like, say their friend is like in pain, maybe they won't be able to empathize or help because they're so they've just become addicted to never having to deal with pain. And then the person might become like a psychopath. They might just be like, maybe they're not selfishly exploiting everyone, but they might at the very least be like, yeah, you feel pain, but that's not my problem, and I don't want it to be my problem, so I'll either try to disengage you and do things that interest me, like play video games, or I will lie to you about how much I care about you so I can get you to stop talking and let me move on. Like, that's where it starts to get bad. But then imagine if someone like that hated people. Imagine if they were like wanted revenge on people. What if they thought society was fucked up? Then that's really bad, because then they won't feel your pain and they can take advantage of the fact that you do. So it gets really fucked up. That's a lot of power. Like, that's probably why it evolved, is because we can have, I mean, that's not the only reason, but a lot of the social aspects of, like, we evolved to use our fears against each other. Like I kind of went into this in a recent video about power and power dynamics, if you're interested in that. So maybe go watch that if you want that. I shouldn't repeat too much, but the basic idea is, like, kind of get into how I think that basically a lot of animals, and humans included, are evolved to kind of exploit each other's fears and desires for their benefits. Like, if you think of like a chimp social hierarchy, it's like they'll use violence to establish power. It's like they're not it's like, it's not just violence. It's, they know that elicits fear, and fear controls your behavior because you're afraid of death. They're not even necessarily going to kill you. They're going to make you afraid of dying so that they can control your body like a puppet. And it's like, I think we evolved to kind of like exploit these dynamics to our benefit. And so that kind of ties into this topic a little bit. I'm not going to go so much into that, though. So what about psychedelics? So my whole thing about psychedelics is I think they sort of decondition, like, if we have all these, so if you think of this dissociation and attention topic, I think that the way you go about your life, like how much attention you allocate to your senses or your internal thoughts or your imagination or everything, I think that we kind of weigh it out, and then, not weigh it out, but like the world around us trains us to have like different ratios of attention on things. Like basically, if I find thinking and imagining things rewarding, but then if that interferes with my ability to, like, say, walk or engage with other people, and it causes me suffering because I failed to engage with other people correctly, so it's like, so with those two things, you can kind of see how it's like there's going to be a ratio of how much do I care about other people, engaging with other people in ways that's rewarding, versus sinking deep into my imagination and ignoring the people. Like, which one is more rewarding? And actually, I think our parents basically impose and train us to focus on external reality, because our whole society is about taking us away from our imaginary world and turning us into, like, slaves. Like, society wants to make you work for the rest of the people, and then it will offer you various rewards, like drugs or money or art. And as long as you do what they say, and then if you don't do what they say, they'll punish you, obviously, with taking away everything good. And so, like, but then you can think of like a more specific scenario, like school. Like, you need to pay attention in school, right? You can't just live in your daydreams. And so we'll be punished for as long as we decide to pay attention in school. And like in an even more nuanced way, I think like our senses, like the way that we even like track objects, and like, do we track this one object, hyper focus? Do we track like all the different objects? So since Twitch is gamers, there's actually research on gamers where they've done this thing where they checked, I think it was like first person shooter players, and they have like more capacity to track multiple objects of attention. And I think that all of us have such a capacity, but it's like our daily life trains us to, rewards us and forces us into a box of using our brain a certain way. Like, it tells us to pay attention to one object and that's it, because it's more rewarding. But then that first person shooter is actually being rewarded to pay attention to different objects and all that. And like, something I've noticed on psychedelics is that I start to actually pay attention to many objects at once. It's like I'm seeing everything. But then I noticed not only that, I can actually choose. I can like look at a single tree to the exclusion of everything else, or I can change it and see everything all at once. And it looks freaky when I see everything all at once. It made me realize that my whole life was kind of like in tunnel vision all the time. And that I think that society wants you to be in tunnel vision because, or it's not even just society, it's probably like, it might even be driving or something. Like, I've wondered, what if driving forces us into tunnel vision and now we're just stuck? Like, we just always are comfortable living in tunnel vision now. But something about the world I don't know exactly what all of it is, but something is training us into a corner of tunnel vision. And you can imagine that it's not just with our vision, but like literally everything is like we're being cornered in all these different kinds of ways, the ways that we frame things about the world, the thoughts that we decide to think about. Even like when I brought up the like how emotions will bias how we interpret things or which memories we notice. And I think we also have like a habitual, repetitious way of engaging the world, and then we just become like addicts. Like, we're addicted to the cozy bubble of life that we've created for ourselves. And I think what psychedelics do is kind of like pop that, and then you're like, what the fuck? Like, where's my bubble? Like, what is all this other stuff? Like, this isn't what I built. This isn't what I signed up for. Like, what? There's a different way of seeing life? And then it's like, even the way that we frame our beliefs about reality is a comfortable bubble. And I think that like the thing the bender I've been on lately is talking about everything in terms of how society is actually hyper-religious. Like, maybe science is kind of trying to escape this, but I don't think psychology has. I don't think soft sciences could realistically ever do that right now. But then even worse is politics and the way that you and I interpret other people's behavior, all of the archetypes that we impose on each other, like personality types, all the character types in movies that we believe we resonate with, even the way we intonate our voice. All of this stuff is like this freaky, culty thing that's enforced by, like, I've also argued this in the Power video, that it's enforced by violence. Like a police, basically. Like, even if I were to do something random, like say I just go to someone, I get in their face like up close, and then I start crying, and then they say to stop, and then I just keep crying. I think that eventually, even though this is like just some random stupid behavior that, like, there's nothing really scary about it. What's scary is that I've become a heretic. I've broken the rules. I've done the bad thing. And so, like, if I kept doing that, I think police would come and then they'd be like, get on the ground. Like, eventually it would get to the point where they're like, are you on drugs? Like, we need to take you out of here. Like, you're a menace to society. You're going to disrupt the religious flows, and then they'll put you in a cage. And, like, like, that's maybe kind of hyperbolic, but you kind of get the point. Like, there are kind of weird framings of the world, and I think that not only do we have these framings that we're indoctrinated to, like beliefs about normal behavior and the right behaviors and which people are evil, which people are good, how gender works, how our sex works, our everything, literally everything. Like we are nothing. We're just pretending. We're just LARPing to be everything that we are. All of these identities and tropes that we subscribe to, like, we want to know ourselves. We want to be knowable to other people. There's a lot of incentives, but I think we're actually just putting on a mask constantly. And there is not really a real true self, or if there is a true self, it's like some fucking crazy animal. Like, we'd just be like if society wasn't imposing things onto us, I think we'd just be like, I feel like taking a shit right now. I'm just going to do it right now. I'm not going to have other people force me to stop doing it. I'm just going to do it. Like, even doing that, you would get arrested, right? Or something. So it's like, I don't know, but that's more like, I don't want people to do that. Arrest them. Fuck that. I don't want people doing that. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the religions. I'm okay with the LARPing. We just need to acknowledge that it's actually what's happening. Like, don't be like, I see the truth. This is my third eye. I am an INTP Taurus, and my Enneagram is whatever. Like, that stuff's more obviously kind of religious-y. But I think even scientists are like trying to define themselves, and they're kind of like not remaining skeptical, even though they're skeptical with science. I'm in a bunch of groups with scientists, and they're constantly doing religious stuff, and I'm calling it out. And then they get mad at me, and then we fight, and they try to strawman me, blah blah blah. But yeah, so okay, the reason that we went into all that is I think that those are different ways that we pay attention to different memories, frameworks. We're like kind of creating this, it's like we're given a bunch of dots, right? And we connect the dots into this picture that we call our worldview. And all we actually have are like these random dots. And we're even like filtering some dots so that we can like impose our favorite version of reality, or the one that we think is most true or makes us feel smartest or whatever. We're doing these biased ways of creating a connected dot thing. And then when you take psychedelics, I'm kind of arguing that you kind of pull back all of your conditioned, trained ways of seeing life and feeling life and reacting to stimuli. And even your senses are like, it's like everything's being ripped away. Like, now you don't just focus through tunnel vision. Now you don't even like, you're not even like focused. Like, if you look at a tree, I'll give you an example. On psilocybin, when I was looking at a tree, I was able to stop seeing it with the way that I've semantically constructed it. Like, so when I look at the tree, I'm conditioned and trained to see it as like a rock almost. I see it like, I am like, the tree doesn't move. It's like this hard substance. I didn't go touch it right now to check, but I know trees. I remember. I was trained for this moment. I was prepared. And then also, I'm like, say you don't assume that. And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe the tree is bendable all of a sudden. And, but not only that, the way that you like see the tree as being separate from the background, it's like you're using conditioned frameworks. Like you kind of have an image of a tree, a symbol in your mind that you've already seen a tree, and so you know what to look for. But beyond that, there's also a parallax, right? So like if I move my head, it's like this. It's like, you see how the tree is separate from the background. But when you don't move, you can't tell as much. And on the psychedelic, it starts to kind of blend together. Like I stop seeing it like these fixed objects. I start thinking like these are just points of light. These are just colors coming into my eyes. And I don't necessarily think that. Like, I mean, I kind of think that, but I'm not trying to like, that sounds like weird when I say it that way. I'm trying to think. It's more like I'm just not having an interpretation, and all of my interpretations are beginning to fail. And the more that I like relax into it, I can kind of let my interpretations fail. So it starts to really shift where I can no longer distinguish between background and objects, and new objects are forming from the pixels that I'm given. So like maybe a branch of the tree connects to the mountain behind it, and it creates like this weird little box, like the edge of the sky and then the branch of the tree like kind of come up like this, right? And then I see this as like this weird floating object. But then the fact that I haven't decided what's like fixed or what's solid or anything, like it could all be made of water for all I know. Like I'm not interpreting it. There's no assumptions. And so it starts to kind of like drift and sway. And like the more that it's doing this, it's like I start to not really be sure of like what's an object, what's not an object, what's anything. And it kind of just lifts up until it's like this non-representational geometric mess of lights and colors. Like I'm just seeing it for what it is, and without assuming all of these frameworks. And I think we're trained, basically. I think we're trained to pay attention to where the lines on the tree are. I think we're kind of trained to like pay attention to the parts of our memory that tell us that's a tree. I remember this, that's a tree. And then we like have this trained response where it's like not just a tree, but it's hard, it's a plant, it's kind of like this living thing, and all these details. Like it gets increasingly conceptual, right? But there's also more tangible things about it as well. And so the point here is like, I think that this is disrupting our conditioned way of attending to things and framing things and all of our conditioned reactions. And I think that's why, like, I don't know if you've seen, but people will like suddenly not be addicted to drugs anymore after they take a single dose of like shrooms or something. So I think it's kind of like smashing out the condition. So like addiction is basically a problem of becoming it's like a reinforcement training problem. Like you're being rewarded over and over, and every time you stop the drug you're being punished over and over, and it just pushes all of your behavior to be biased based on that dynamic and managing it. And so the psychedelic might come along and kind of like strip away all of your reactions, all of your cravings and urges for a while. And then you see life in a whole different way. Like you were addicted to the comfortable bubble that protected you from the absurdity and insanity that is reality, that we don't know anything, that we're pretending to know all these things because it makes us feel better. You pretend to be your little political thing. You pretend to be your personality type. You pretend that you're like your favorite character on TV and all that stuff. You're creating that. You're creating it because it feels better. And it helps you escape pain somehow, even if your framework is painful. Like people with depression. I think there's something, I think it's really complicated. It's hard to explain. I don't know if that's the direction we should go, but I do think that you can be trained to be more depressive, and that, like, okay, if you engage with external reality and then it fucks you up. It trains you not to engage with external reality. Then you might sit in bed and you're like, what's the point? Everything's just going to fail. But actually sitting in bed is at least comfortable. It's not like you're like, you know what, I'm depressed. I'm going to do jumping jacks for 26 hours straight and then put knives in my back. But I'm not going to kill myself. I'm just going to torture myself because I'm going to chase everything that sucks. Like, obviously, people don't exactly do that. And there might be some explanation for, like, why someone might actually do something like that. But that's not really what the point I'm making. So, like, when a person's depressed, it's like, literally they're going into a comfortable bubble. And it just sucks. It's just they've been cornered in the shittiest comfortable bubble ever. Like, they've been, like, laying in bed is obviously cozy. But it's horrible, too, if you aren't allowed to contribute to society and everyone is going to look down upon you. So it's like, it's comfortable laying in bed, but, like, look at everything else. It fucking sucks. But it's like you're also building a protective thing by kind of like not engaging with potential trauma. You're running away from failure, the risk of failure. For some people, there's a lot of ways that people can end up depressed, but that's one way. You could also just be like literally trapped in someone's basement, and then they're like, you're not allowed to do anything, and then you get bored, and then it just fucking sucks, right? That's like a other realistic depressive scenario. And then, like, genetically, people will be more or less sensitive to things that would lead them towards depression, like more sensitive to what happens if you fail, like more pain, and that everything is more painful, and that you're more likely to find yourself in such a shitty situation because you hate pain more than everyone else. Stuff like that. I'm curious, are you still out there? I'm going on for a while. I wonder how long people would watch. I watch like 3-hour videos sometimes, so like, I don't know. I think people watch it, but only some people. But also, the way I watch it is like, I watch for like maybe 30 minutes, and then I like spread it out over like days or something. So I don't know. But I'm sort of getting tired. And if I'm tired, I'll make worse content. And also, people probably watch less and less the longer the video goes. But it's whatever. I kind of wish I recorded the rest of this, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So yeah, there's also dissociative drugs like ketamine, which I think what they're doing is actually like silencing things. Like if you think of the explosion grabbing your attention suddenly, I think external reality is doing that constantly. But then there's things like, have you ever heard of, there's like that room that's absolutely silent and people go crazy in it, they say. Like there's absolutely no sound in the room and it causes people to have psychotic symptoms and also hallucinations. And there's like this paper here, they talk about how people have auditory hallucinations in that room. And I think what's going on there is that I think that obviously when you dream, it's like a real experience, like you hallucinate it basically. And I think that what's preventing us from doing that normally is that external reality is such an immense source of punishment and reward, because that's where everything happens. That's our connection to the universe. So it's such a strong incentive to pay attention to it that we are pulled away from our imagination. I think if you sat there and tried really hard, you could pay attention to imagination so strongly that you lose touch with reality. If you've ever daydreamed, it's pretty much what I would say was happening. And so what I think is happening in this hallucination in the quiet room is that there's nothing left in your auditory perception to draw your attention of the auditory world away. So all that's left is for you to pay attention to imaginary auditory stimuli, which happen to be louder than the emptiness of the void of the room. And I think that this kind of connects to things about what's happening in schizophrenia, too. But also especially dissociative drugs. Dissociatives are anesthesia, so it's like especially interesting. They literally mute your senses. They make your whole body go numb. Nothing to pay attention to if you're numb. And the higher doses experiences, you can basically not pay attention to the external world at all, and then they call it like a K-hole. You detach and just start having vivid hallucinatory realms. And I think that that's basically what's happening, is you're silencing your senses. And I think that that has actually a utility for probably, I'm not going to say it. Not going to say it. That would be like offering medical advice, actually. I'll just say I think that it can... No, I'm not going to say it. Actually, I'm just not going to say it. Okay. Oh, shit, I said it here. Hilarious. No, I didn't say it here. Whatever, it's too late. I talk about ADHD and how it relates to all this stuff. So I'll, in a way to discourage people, because I do obviously care about discouraging people from ever trying dissociatives for ADHD. I think dissociatives will fuck you up, and I think it'll cause long-lasting fucked up changes to your mind. I think not paying attention to external reality enough will fuck you up. And also there's even evidence in animals of like holes forming in the brain. If that's not enough, then whatever. My advice is to don't fucking try it. Just go with your doctor, and maybe you can bring up this idea with your doctor. Good luck. But I actually do know people that get prescribed like Memantine for things, weird things like that, off-label. But I don't like it. I don't agree with doing that. I think that there are neurotoxic mechanisms that are kind of involved. I think using ketamine for depression, like in one-off doses, is maybe okay. But I think it's really sketchy if people start like medicating like for attention. That's so bad. It's like, what if you just started like slicing up your brain because you noticed that there's like a... Like, did you know actually that if you damage the prefrontal cortex, it causes an immediate plasticity effect? Probably to deal with the damage or something like that, or manage the effects that are failing because of the damage. So it's like, don't be doing stuff that you don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you're doing. We don't know what we're doing. But it is interesting and experimental and whatever. Okay, so I'm going to end the stream here now. Thanks for joining. I hope it's interesting. Good luck with your life. This is the second goodbye you've had in the same stream. Goodbye.